Hello there, and welcome to another movie review here on HSGU, and it's been a while since I last did a movie review, and I thought, you know what, I love horror, what better way of getting back into at least doing a review or two than by reviewing a movie which I watched yesterday in the cinema, which was 2021's Candyman. Kind of a reboot, at least from some of the marketing it's presented that way. It's actually much more like the Halloweens of late, wherein it disregards the sequels and is a direct sequel, in effect, to the original. Which is an interesting idea, because I think especially with some of these older horror properties from, 80s, 90s, some of the sequels tend to be what let them down. It tends to be the first one or two which are really good, and then they kind of go into the cash grab territory after that, or at least lose their way to some degree. I think this idea of going back and becoming a direct sequel can work very well. However, this is definitely a movie where there were a mixed bag of compliments and negatives which I can give to it. There were a lot of things which I really liked about this, but there were definitely some things which were pretty important in terms of the overall narrative and from the making of a movie perspective, which I wasn't a fan of. Now, some of those are spoilers, so I'm going to save those for the second half of the video, if you will, the spoiler section, but there is one, in fact it was the main one to me, which I can discuss in a non-spoiler sense, and I will be doing so in the first part of the video. Now, in terms of the story, there is immediately two huge differences, or there are immediately two huge differences between this and the original, which stood out to me. The first is the choice of a primary character. In the older one, it's a kind of middle-aged looking, at least, white female, who I believe, if I recall correctly, is writing a piece on the people and the plight of Cabrini Green. In this movie, it's a younger, physically larger African-American male who's an artist, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, I believe his name is, who I last saw as Black Manta in Aquaman. He didn't really have that much to work with in that movie, but I much preferred him in this one. I think he gave a great performance. I really enjoyed him in the movie, and he has a kind of subtle obsession that develops throughout the movie, which gets more and more overt, because the story revolves around him kind of overhearing the story of Candyman and Cabrini Green. He's a kind of budding artist with some success who's looking for his next muse, his next inspiration. And this becomes that inspiration that he was looking for, and it basically catalogues his obsession with it. The problem with that is the movie's only 90 minutes long, so there's not that much development you can go into. Now, I would be very interested to see potentially an extended cut of this. I don't think that will necessarily happen, but if it did, I would be curious to see what it could add. There are two reasons why I'd like to see that, though. One is I think more fleshing out could be even better. Secondly, though, and this brings me to the number one issue which I had with the movie upon leaving the cinema, is that this movie gave off a distinct vibe to me when it comes to the horror. And that is, it almost seemed desperate to be a PG-13. Because in very PG-13 manner, it would almost always cut away from any kind of actual gore or violence. And even though some is shown, it's mostly the aftermath. Now, that can be done very well, but in this movie, it almost felt lazy to me. It felt like, not that they didn't want to show the violence, but almost like, as I said, they were almost craving a PG-13 to broaden the audience, which can sometimes work, but for me, it simply didn't here. Now, I'm not going to get into specific scenes until we get to the spoiler section, but overarchingly, that is my number one problem with the film. Because horror movies are about balance. There are two primary types of horror that you can make. There's the type of horror which has more of a drama slant and a message and a social commentary sometimes, such as this one or Get Out more recently. Also, of course, from Jordan Peele, who had involvement with this movie. He didn't direct this, but I believe in the credits it said he was a producer, and I think he co-wrote the script or the screenplay, something along those lines, so he had an interest and he was involved. They have a similar kind of vibe and a similar kind of potential, but I believe Get Out reached it and this movie didn't. And one of the reasons why is because of what I mentioned. The second thing that I was talking about when it comes to different kinds of horror is there are crucially two types of horror character, primarily, that you can make. There are characters who you care about, who get fleshed out, who can go through horrific things and sometimes even die, but it matters. It really matters because you like them. Then you have the Saw, the Final Destination style characters who you don't care about. They are human fodder to be entertainingly killed. This movie makes a mistake, I believe, in having mostly characters that you don't care about get killed, which can work, just like Saw, just like Final Destination, as I said. But the issue comes in with that PG-13 vibe. Because not only do you not care, but they also don't give you the satisfaction of seeing the horror deaths that, let's be honest, a lot of us are there for. So, to me, if the movie has a message, like a Schindler's List, for example, where it has a strong message, but you're not necessarily going to watch it multiple times, then that's fine. But when it comes to more of a strict horror movie, especially one with an existing franchise and a well-known name that is known at least to some degree for its kills, in the first movie even, to not deliver that, or to hide away, or shy away, or off-screen kill a lot of people, to me it just left me wanting, and it hurt the film a lot, in my opinion. Now again, I'm going to get more into that in the spoiler section, which is coming up soon, but overall, some of the things that I really loved about the film were the way it was shot. I loved the locations. The location scouting was very good. A lot of it had an eerie tone. I really liked the characters, actually, and I liked the majority of the performances. There are certain very humorous lines and scenes which kind of pop out of nowhere. For instance, a character who will open a dark door down to an eerie basement and just say, "Nope, I ain't going down there." I love that. That, again, was reminiscent of Get Out, and it's almost like the antithesis to what white people would always do in a movie, which is, oh, let's go down the dark basement. I like the fact that these characters are smarter than that, and it reminds me of the way I like to write as well. I don't like stupid characters, regardless of what their ethnicity is. You can simply do better than that, and I think, as horror fans, a lot of us are too comfortable with having stupid characters. Again, they can be fodder, but don't make the main characters stupid, and all too often they fall into that trope. In this movie, nobody felt stupid. There were one or two decisions that I'm sure you wouldn't always agree with, but that doesn't make a stupid character. Anyone can make mistakes. So, characters I enjoyed, performances were really good. Some of the makeup effects were good as well, but again, they shy away from a lot of that kind of stuff. Some gore is shown, but it's mostly the kills that let it down, to be honest. Now, overall, that's pretty much it for my non-spoiler thoughts. I think the movie achieved many of what it was aiming for, or at least what I saw it as aiming for, very well. And another key difference, as well as the choice of main character between this and the original, is, at least from what I, as a white person, took from it, that the original seemed very much focused in on the plight of the people of Cabrini Green, and the kind of lifestyle that they were forced to be in, forced to put up with, and the kind of conditions that they were forced to be in. This movie has very little of that. It has some, but very little, and is much more about police brutality and the kind of real-world horror that police can and all too often are, especially as, for instance, a black person, an African-American in this case, but even black people here in England or wherever in the world. And not just black people. Here in England, for instance, if you're from the Middle East, if you're Pakistani, in other countries I'm sure there are similar scenarios between police and certain ethnicities. In the UK, even a lot of white people don't like the police either. So I get that, and I think it's a very, very apropos slant to take on the story. I like that. I think it was a strong choice. And I think for the most part it was executed well. There was some very strong imagery played into that idea. Toward the end, I think it goes a little bit too far, but again, that's for the spoiler section. So I keep talking about the spoilers and stuff that I can't talk about, so let's get into that now with my spoiler side of the review. Talking spoilers, let's keep on track with that point of police. I love the way the police were shown for the most part, as long as it was purely visual. The first look you get at them is the two cops sitting in the car. They look like creeps themselves. I thought that was an interesting choice, and the more times you see the police, the more it becomes clear that is the message of the film, and I like that message. Second time you see them, the kids looking up at the frosted glass, the silence, and instead of a classic Michael Myers popping out, the police pop out, swarm down the stairs, and beat an innocent man, to all intents and purposes, to death. A weirdo, but an innocent man when it comes to this crime, at least. Again, very horror thing to do, like the piranhas descending in. I thought that was effective. One of the most effective pieces of artistic imagery in the film is toward the end, where the, of course, new Candyman is shot by the police, and instead of at that moment seeing the police, you just see the shadow, the outline of the police with the gun held up. very boogeyman-esque. And it's clear that at least some of the social commentary is that the police can be, if not usually are, the real-life horror, the real-life boogeyman, not some Candyman. I love that. I love the imagery, I love the social commentary, and I think for the most part, as I said, the movie does a good job of that. The one issue which I took with that was the very last interaction, where she's sitting in the car, cops in the front, and he's trying to, as I'm sure all too many black people have had to go through, he's trying to fabricate the events that happened. I can't lie and say that's something I've had to go through, but I can certainly imagine it happening a lot. The problem came, at least for me watching it, is who is the scene for? Is that officer supposed to be cartoonishly over the top, or is it supposed to be a lesson to learn from? Because the issue that I could foresee is that especially for example, older white viewers, who are the kind of people who you really want to change, and younger as well, but in particular I thought, because I was in the cinema with a lot of older white folks, and I thought, I bet they're going to look at this and think, nobody's that bad, surely. Nobody's that extreme or that cartoonishly over the top. And I feel that if just one simple change was made, if that officer sat in the front seat, was just recast to some physically unassuming, normal-looking, politely spoken, seemingly endearing person, but saying the exact same manipulative things, I think that would just be that much more sleazy and icky and, crucially, memorable. But that guy is so cartoonishly over the top that you know he's going to die, and it's just a ridiculous scene. And to me, that kind of undercuts it a little bit. In terms of other things which I maybe didn't like as much, the runtime, as I said, I believe could have easily been better. But to get back to my number one gripe and talk about some specific reasons why, the kills. So, as I said, this movie gives you characters' deaths that you don't care about, but it also doesn't give you the gory deaths that you want those nasty or horrible or worthless characters to have. Which to me undercuts, in particular, the rewatchability of this movie. I get it. I like the social side, but I don't see myself watching this movie again. And that's a disappointment to me, because I would love to be able to say that I'd like to see it again. I would rewatch Hereditary, Velvet Buzzsaw, various other more recent horror films, Get Out. This one, I just don't see myself rewatching it, because once you get that social side, or appreciate that, like a Schindler's List moment, well, you don't go back to Schindler's List for a popcorn movie. And I don't see myself going back to this one for the same reason, because it doesn't offer the pure entertainment horror side. So, for example, the first art snob who dies with his intern. Candyman is presented as being invisible a lot of times in the film, which is an interesting choice, and I'm sure that was awkward to film, but it felt like a cop-out, to be honest, because you couldn't see much going on the screen. A lot of the deaths are done from a distance, and he kind of felt like a noob spamming Doom, where he just uses the same weapon over and over again, because he would do the same thing to basically every character. Lift them up, he's invisible, slash the throat. That's it. That gets repetitive very quickly, especially when you can't even see the villain. You see him here or there in the background of a mirror, and a lot of those I did enjoy, because they were subtle. The actual kills, though, really let it down for me, and I hate to have to say that, because Candyman has so much potential to be really nasty with his kills. There's nothing in this movie which even comes close to the iconic bees in the mouth moment. Like, not even close to that one moment. Nothing in this movie can even match that. I believe that Tony Todd is sorely underutilized. We've got, for example, another, to me at least, slight contradiction in storytelling, wherein early on you get the not Candyman, and he's presented as being through the eyes of this secondary character, the young kid who grows up and loses his mind, who works in the laundromat. I thought he was a great character, and in many ways he almost felt like more of an interesting character than most of the others in the film. I almost wanted to see more of his story. But why would the character keep coming back as that guy? For two reasons. One, why would that kid see him as Candyman when he knew he was innocent? You wouldn't see somebody who's innocent and harmless as a villain. There's no reason for a child to project that in his mind. He would project, if anything, surely one of the policemen. Secondly, why would Yahya Abdul's character see him at all? He has no frame of visual reference for that character whatsoever, so why would he see him? Now, I understand that it is, kind of a Batman-esque name that's passed through different characters who have been killed unjustly, so from that point of view it makes sense, but to me it undercuts the guy being an innocent, and frankly it just completely wastes what Tony Todd could have been doing in the movie and having a lot more screen time, because again, yes, you have a social message, but it's also horror, and you want to be intimidated by the villain. I just didn't find that guy intimidating. Tony Todd has far more of a physical, visual, verbal presence than that actor does. No knock on him, it's just not his kind of role to me. He was weird, but I found him more weird as a human at the start of the film than he ever was as Candyman, whereas Tony Todd just naturally, he revels in the role, and you can tell. So I think that was a shame, to be honest, that he wasn't utilised more. I get it from the storytelling perspective, but it just feels like a little bit of a wasted opportunity. And to me, that kind of sums up my thoughts on this movie overall. I think there are a lot of things that it does really well. Soundtrack, the way it looks, the social commentary is very hard-hitting, and I really enjoyed that. The visual imagery, I love the paintings that he did, those 5 horrific pieces. I would definitely hang those up myself on my walls. So there were plenty of things that I loved about the movie, but I think more often than not, it felt like a case of, it could have been so much more. This could have been that much better. That is just me, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who would disagree, but that's it for my thoughts. If you've already seen the movie, of course, tell me yours down below. If you haven't seen the movie yet, you shouldn't be watching this part of the review anyway, because I've spoiled a lot of it for you. But yeah, tell me where you think I'm wrong or right, things you agree or disagree with, maybe things that you think I overlooked, etc. And of course, check out the other horror reviews which I've done here on the channel as well. And I actually did a review for Candyman, I believe, years ago now on the channel. So check that one out perhaps as well. I probably wouldn't even agree with some of the stuff that I said back then anyway, but it'll be interesting to see how things have changed. And until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.